The world has ended. Everything that remains of humanity's culture is stored here in this podcast, a time capsule assembled by three white dudes from what was once called the Midwest. This is not everything. This is not most things. But this is it.
Hello and welcome to another episode of This Is It, a pop culture podcast for the end of the world. I'm Sam Webb.
And I'm Gabe Webb.
And I'm Daniel Osborne.
And this show is all about making it easy for you to gather together around what I assume is a slapdash radio receiver device and be reminded of the olden days before the great darkening of the sky and the murder crows.
Before the burden of a written language.
This is the, I believe we said this before, but this is the Rosetta Stone of all the things that aren't important. That you might, when you come across a stranded laser disc in the middle of the Great Wastes, you can interpret it to understand all of its viability.
I mean, really, if you have spare mental energy to expend, it might be better spent than on trying to recreate early 21st century pop culture. But, I mean, it's all we think about anyway, so why shouldn't you?
Because we live in a world free of fear regarding basic needs, and so maybe the only reason that's the case is because of all of the pop culture we assume. It's probably not. It's probably because of infrastructure and the lots of hard work of lots of people. But as far as we know,
what we're saying is we have plenty of time to stress out about whether or not Ben Affleck will make a good Batman. And why shouldn't you have that same stress?
Yeah. It'll serve as a distraction while it's your turn on the crank to charge the battery that heats your cave-based dwelling. But I want to throw, Dan, I think it's your topic this week. What do you want to explain to the future folk?
Today I want to be really insensitive because today I want to talk about nothing but food.
Oh,
I was you thought I was going to say something else, didn't you?
Yeah, I really did. You that was a real bait and switch.
I mean, unless, of course, your specific apocalypse, we're not one to judge whatever your personal apocalypse is. Is it apocalypse of too much food?
That would be quite an apocalypse.
In case this is still insensitive, because we're just triggering you left and right about food.
Yeah, they're just quiches everywhere, and you're trying desperately to avoid them.
Just fine French cooking just pouring out of everyone's, balconies. But no, we're going to be talking about food and the experience of food in really inappropriate media, because we experience food currently with our mouths. You probably do with the soles of your feet, and and it's not really something that lends itself to visual media and even written word. We're only kind of approximating it, kind of comparisons and analogies that don't really hold up. I wanted to say that I might be an inappropriate host for this topic because Sam and Gabe were both there in college with me when my friends had to give me an intervention because for too many consecutive meals, all I ate were waffles.
They were part of other meals, right? If I remember correctly, it was you would have most of a dinner, but then you would come back with a waffle.
I mean, that sounds like me. That kind of gluttony sounds very like me. But I think on more than one occasion, the waffle was the spongy, syrupy foundation, and that which other atrocities were heaped on top of. I'd say there was more than one mostly waffle-based meal.
Ooh, yeah, I do remember those dark times.
Yeah, so this is it's inappropriate and offensive, and that's where we're going today on This Is It. So when I say food or cooking, I don't know. Does that spark anything in you, or do I just? I mean, food is my main obsession, so I could solo this show, but I wanted to open it up to you guys first.
Yeah, when thinking about food and more really like because the mediums of the like visual media doesn't necessarily do food justice automatically. Like I think that when it does a good job, it's notable and kind of interesting, like the art of food and the value of it. And there's a movie, I don't know if you guys have seen it. It's a really nice little movie called Chef that is Jon Favreau, and he plays a chef who gets fired from his high-end LA restaurant for having like an outburst that's basically about how he yells at a food critic who disrespects his choices, and he's just like, you don't get it, like I have to appeal to da 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 da, and it gets a little bit in the weeds for a bit about like food, like chef culture, but then the whole movie is really about how he and his son go to Miami for like a vacation after he gets fired, and they end up buying a food truck, and he travels the country like kind of getting back to his roots of just making good food that people like. And it's really like the visuals of the food are really good, and it's also just like it's kind of about how like cooking connects people in a way, and there's some stuff that is already very dated, like Twitter, like they made it when Twitter was like blowing up, and so there's a lot of like cheesy Twitter graphics of them like sending off tweets, and an actual little animated bird like flies out of their phone, and then like people show up to their but like as a movie, it's like it's a nice little movie that has a really good soundtrack and is really about like he's teaching his son how to cook, and also while being a little pretentious sometimes, is ultimately about like it's fun to make good food and it's fun to eat good food, and like when people are well fed, it's a good time, and it's kind of sweet, and he sort of returns back to LA having a different perspective and ends up starting a restaurant that's more like his style, having gone back to his roots with like these Cuban sandwiches on this food truck, and it's really fun. Have either of you guys seen that?
I've not seen it.
No, I've not seen it. But the way you sound it makes it sound really like sweet and lovely, and that sounds like a really excellent thing to do about food.
Yeah, like it was the first thing I thought of when you mentioned the topic. It just because it does a good job of both identifying like chef culture and all that stuff kind of in the same way like intense cooking shows do, but with a lighthearted sort of look at it. And it doesn't fall apart in the third act like every other Jon Favreau movie.
Yeah.
Oh, Favreau burn.
Yeah.
I love that you started from a place of food and cooking bringing everyone together, because where I first went was cooking tearing people apart. The first entry I have is one of many. There's a whole subgenre now of reality cooking based TV shows where, 4 chefs enter, 1 chef leaves, and they throw ridiculous challenges at them to the point where, it doesn't make any sense. And my favorite of this is a TV show on the Food Network called Cutthroat Kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
And
yes.
it's
so good.
It's based purely on kind of like a tragedy of the commons. If grandma's home cooking, if grandma was really studied in game theory. So they have $100,000. They divide up against 4 competitors, and if they win, they get to keep that money. The twist is every round they bid on auctions for ways to screw over other players. So maybe they have to be like shackled to an Iron Maiden, or they have to make nachos only with like crushed up rice cakes,
Yeah.
or they can't use knives.
I remember one example where they had to like poach an egg on like a gas like camp stove.
Yeah.
They couldn't use any other heat.
You can only use a deep fat fryer, and you can only pick out your food with your hands. Not only is, I think, it an excellent example of the reality cooking show hosted by the exemplary Alton Brown, it also just kind of really shows kind of like a psychological profile of these people, because the way a lot of us approach cooking and think about cooking is, if you have a good relationship with your family, which I'm not going to assume that you do, like, you know, your mom or your grandma cooking for you, like these sweet motherly figures. In the professional cooking world, it's actually still an area where women are trying to break through the glass ceiling, and it's temperamental dudes with big personalities who are kind of just buttholes,
Yeah.
who are I mean, not that dissimilar from like high-powered attorneys or like really driven musicians. Like it's kind of this like competition and artistry and drive. Let me go ahead and say, in case it isn't clear, any woman can be just as good a cook as any man, but you see these through lines of like, oh, you're a woman, you also happen to be attractive, you're not a good cook, just automatically. And just like watching food and the making of good food tear each other apart is something that I don't normally like to completely contradict my co-host, but it's a part of it. It's a part of cooking pop culture right now.
Oh, totally.
This push and pull of togetherness and like, screw you, man.
Yeah, it really, that show for me was more than any of the other sort of cooking shows or celebrity chef things, really identified for me the culture of like chefs in the, like, there's kind of this similar ego to like musicians or other types of artists where for some reason ego is somehow considered a part of the cooking process, like as if like understanding flavor and all that stuff's important and knife skills are important, but also like if you don't have like kind of, if you're not bringing some unique heat, then you're not gonna like stand out, and that somehow that gets equated with like machismo, even though it's a very weird attitude, especially considering that like in larger culture outside of like professional chef world, cooking is actually kind of on the other end of the sexist spectrum, considered to be like a task that women are better at.
Right.
And so it's extra strange.
I think there's also something really funny about people being pretentious about, like, I enjoy good food. I'm not saying that we should all eat Totino's pizza rolls. Also love Totino's pizza rolls.
Yeah, Totino's, if you're listening, we will do a whole episode about your product if you will pay us for it.
Absolutely.
You can pay us in pizza rolls too.
I think it's funny that people get so bent out of shape and so pretentious about something that the end of its journey is coming out of someone's bum. Mm-hmm. Like that's the final destination for every 3-star Michelin meal that's ever been consumed. Like that's where it goes. That's what happens.
I mean,
to
it's basically a metaphor for all of life, really.
Boo.
It all ends up coming out of a bum.
No, but Dan, to your earlier point, I think it is interesting that all of these incredibly hostile reality competition, cooking-based reality competition shows ultimately thrive on the audience at home being able to make a judgment about an element of the competition. The essential element of the competition is a thing that they can't qualify at all, you know? Like at home, I can't taste whatever these chefs produce.
There's a great moment. The NPR blogger Gene Demby said, like, I don't get into cooking competition shows because it's like watching a show called Olfactory Chemist. Like, what is the point? I can't judge that.
Right. So ultimately, it just comes down to how you feel about these competitors, and I guess maybe how pretty their stuff looks on a plate.
Yeah.
So it really is wholesalely embodies how shallow a lot of reality competition really is.
And I guess on their best day, like their goal for being on this television show is to like sell a cookbook or do something kind of that their personality needs to be memorable enough for you to go like, you know what, I want to learn how to make those dumplings they talked about. But yeah, like that, a lot of it just seems to come from a place of like, I'm better at this thing than you are, and that's what makes for better TV than people who are like food scientists who are excellent and skilled at their craft. Because you can't eat the TV yet.
Yet. One of the cooking shows that I am most put off by in general is Throwdown with Bobby Flay. I think it's the premise of which is that someone, a cook or chef from across the United States, is known for making one particular dish really outstanding, like delicious cream puffs or Philly cheesesteaks or whatever. And then Bobby Flay shows up and invites them to a cook-off where he makes the same thing, and then there's a blind taste test over whose is better. And I just hate this premise so much.
Yeah.
Why do you hate it?
To me, it just like reeks of the kind of ego that I find really off-putting about cooking competition shows in general. Just like, I can show up in your house and do your thing better after trying for 1 week, whereas you have been slaving away at this restaurant, earning your reputation for however long from all these adoring customers. And here I am with my Bobby Flay tsunami of braggadocious fame, and I will crush you like a tiny grain.
Tiny ancient grain.
Like a tiny peppercorn through the tourney grater of my own dickishness. I'm sorry, Bobby Flay. I really don't dislike you that much. I just dislike the premise of this show.
Yeah,
So
it's gross.
I think that's really funny because there's actually been like 3 different shows. The idea being, let's compete with Bobby Flay. There's the one where he shows up to other people, and then there's the one where other people come to him. And so there's 2 things I want to say about Bobby Flay. One, he seems mildly game to get beaten. Like, I don't have a score sheet, but like he loses. I think he's lost every episode I've ever seen of that show.
Yeah,
the
and
other thing,
to be fair, yeah.
The other thing I have to say about Bobby Flay is almost completely irrelevant, but that's that on an episode of Law and Order SVU, he was a victim where a woman harvested his sperm to sell it to a high-end sperm bank, and I don't want that to be forgotten in pop culture history.
Wait, was he playing himself in this episode?
He wasn't named, but he was definitely like a chef.
Okay, so the idea was that
He's
someone
Bobby Flay,
harvested-
and someone wanted to like sell Bobby Flay sperm.
So in the same way that like a genius cellist or like a Harvard educated like
I think those
physicist.
people were also victims of this.
Whoa.
Yeah, I mean, I'll use your judgment when editing, but the premise being that like an electrode to the anus allows a roofied man to be harvested.
Whoa. This is none of those words were what I thought would come up in our episode about food and cooking.
I told you this was so inappropriate.
But I very much appreciate that. That's like when talking about Bobby Flay, I did not have that factoid, and now I do, and I will never not have that in my mind when I see him on television. For the better.
It's one of those things that like I can't not share it with you all. You have to know.
Yeah. No, that's very good.
Admittedly, there's a level of hypocrisy in me talking about how much I hate the premise of Throwdown, because my contribution to this discussion was going to be the original Japanese version of Iron Chef.
Sure.
Which Bobby Flay did appear on, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he appeared in 2 episodes.
I think part of like Iron Chef there being an American version was kind of based on the back of like Bobby Flay's American celebrity and like familiarity with the format.
The premise of the show is that Chairman Kaga an eccentric Japanese, I guess, millionaire who loves food, assembles a team of the finest chefs from Japan in the areas of French, Japanese, Chinese, and Italian cuisine. And each week, a rising star in the culinary world of Japan is invited to Kitchen Stadium to compete against the Iron Chef of his or her choosing. And they have 1 hour to prepare a multi-course dinner using a special ingredient that is not revealed until showtime. And they can be as mundane as cabbage or as sort of bizarre and weirdly specific as unisex salmon.
And do they have to be like the principal ingredient in whatever the final product is, or they just have to be on the plate?
It has to be a star ingredient of each dish, of each course.
That's right, because it's a multi-course endeavor.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
And they do have sous chefs and like prep cooks helping them along the way. But still, yes, they are assembling a multi-course meal in 1 hour.
Yeah, that is something that I think is interesting about a lot of that. I think the main reason it exists in a lot of these cooking competition shows is for TV's sake, like that it really hypes the drama, that they're all on a clock that like is unbelievable as somebody who is not a professional chef, that you could go from like, I don't know what I'm going to be doing at all to finishing a meal like that could win a competition in an hour.
What do you think it is about, because the like mystery ingredient aspect is incredibly common. Chopped does it with like a whole mystery basket, and Iron Chef, I think, is kind of pioneering of it. Is it leveling the playing field? Do we just not want to see two chefs go head to head on, like, what do you think it is about that?
Yeah, I think it levels the playing field in the form of kind of narrowing it to like, yeah, you are going to, at least in theory, I guess it presents it right then, and then they have to immediately get to it. So I think it, again, as somebody who is not a chef, it would be like, it's kind of amazing to me that somebody can just go like, oh yeah, I'll do that recipe I know by heart that I didn't know I was going to have to do today because I didn't know I was going to be dealing with unisex salmon until just now. And so like, it'd be one thing if you like, hey, you're going to be cooking venison, so come with your best venison meals in tow. But when you're told that right then, like, I think they always, in shows like MasterChef, where there's a whole bunch of amateur chefs that are all competing, and sometimes it's like an ingredient is revealed, and then they have to do it a certain kind of way. A lot of times, like, a percentage of the show is just them going to people who have never worked with that before and are like, yeah, I don't know how to cook this. Like, I don't know what temperature to be at. I don't know this, that. Like, and that's kind of what brings a lot of the drama to the table.
Well, I think a lot of chef skills eventually reach a point where technical mastery would sort of be even across the board. You know, like if you are one of the contestants on Iron Chef, you are already, to some degree, a successful chef and restaurateur, and you are going up against someone else who is also that. So, like, you aren't going to, like, neither of you are going to, like, burn the toast, you know, if they were making toast.
Everyone knows how to chop an onion.
Right.
Yeah.
But to introduce the knowledge of one specific ingredient, but also to be able to improvise with that and adapt recipes you might know or might serve already, I think that adds the element of knowledge and nimbleness back in a way that, like, I guess it's the difference between two people having a debate where they don't know the questions beforehand and two people just preparing opposite speeches.
No, and I think that idea sort of seeps into Cutthroat Kitchen as well, where they, like, rather than it being a specific mystery ingredient, it's like, all right, here you have to cook something that's kind of broad, and it is, any chef that's going to be on a show like this already knows how to make, like, it's something like a dessert with ice cream or whatever, like or an appetizer. Like it's really broad, and then the whole thing is like you've got to basically supermarket sweep into a pantry, and then you get handicapped in these weird ways where like but yeah, the baseline assumption is you know how to make an appetizer, and that like your recipes that you have like in your back pocket are going to blow people away, but then you also have to use nothing but a hatchet. We've talked about Bobby Flay. I'd like to, this is not a necessarily a single program, but I'd like to kind of break with tradition a little bit on the show and just throw in a man.
Okay. I think there's going to be legal repercussions from putting a man in a time capsule. So just choose carefully.
I say this not mostly just because I don't know that there's one single program that does justice who this creature is. And of course I'm referring to Guy Fieri.
Oh.
Who I think is the pinnacle of like crossing the Rubicon away from even cooking. Like his show, he's a chef, right? Like
yeah, I think he won like America's next Food Network star, I think is how we got him. But no, he's a restaurateur. He's a culinary professional.
But like most of his show, like there are shows that are on like the Food Network that are basically just eating shows. Like there's like a show where a dude just goes and does challenges and like the focus is like, this guy's crazy. He can eat so much. Like it's so spicy, so big. Like it's a 72-ounce steak. Guy Fieri is not that. He just goes to places and eats and just talks about food. Most of, like I feel like Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives, which is his like maybe the centerpiece of his like growing media empire, is all just him going to a city and being like, I found these places and they're great, and then being told about the food by the people who actually make it, who you don't ever remember the names of, and then he just like eats food in front of you and makes noises, and it's a show. And
no. Wait. We can't let this slide. He doesn't just go there. He watches other people make food. Then he sticks his grubby hands into the dish, takes out a big finger scoopful of dip like a bear, and just like licks it off of his own finger. Like I feel like there's a certain amount of like caveating I should do. Like I should have to like, full disclosure on Guy Fieri, because he actually has done a fairly great service to my hometown of Cincinnati, and like really highlighted and not elevated, that's the wrong word, but like devoted a whole episode of his show to some really great places here in town. But I can't jive with like, dude, I don't want you in the kitchen. You are not wearing gloves, and I do not know where that hand has been. And like, get it out of the creme fraiche. That is inappropriate.
Yeah, that is, and that's kind of what's the big thing for me about Guy Fieri specifically, is that he does, like, Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives does kind of signal boost cool places. Like, I know people who, like, when they go to a city for vacation, use the Triple D app to, like,
there's
find...
an app.
Yeah, dude. Because, like, I remember going to a couple really, like, good, like, I went to a really good barbecue place in Chicago that was near where I lived, and they, like, it was very cool and, like, a pretty, like, intentional interior, kind of, like, rusticy feeling, like a smokehouse sort of deal. But then there's a big poster of Guy Fieri's face on the wall, and it's very out of place, but that's part of the deal when you get featured on that show and are on the app and like get all this foot traffic from being featured, is that you have to have his giant face, which is like, it's like a Pokemon man. Like,
oh yeah, no. Guy Fieri is someone who went Super Saiyan and then got fat.
Yes. He's got a heck of a facial hair go whatever, like a soul patch situation, and then just frosted tips to the max. Like he's and he's wearing sunglasses backwards on his head, and it's a whole thing. And yet he, in some ways, like influences the food landscape of smaller market towns. Because when people visit Cincinnati, there's somebody who goes to certain places because he has visited there, and it's now on an app.
Yeah. So Guy Fieri calls him one of his big things is like, "Come on, we're going to Flavortown," which leads me to like really remix that. Oh yeah, Guy Fieri, mayor of Flavortown. Oh, Guy Fieri, czar of Flavorville. Oh, Guy Fieri, alderman of Flavor Central, whatever. And like it's not all. Oh, and his signature at his restaurants, one of his signature things is donkey sauce.
Donkey sauce,
which is a revolting name. But yeah, he does. He goes to legit great real places. Like in Cincinnati, there's a like a very vegan friendly, really chill kind of hippie vibe. And then you turn to your right, and there's a stenciled graffiti of his face in neon colors on the wall and his signature underneath. And you're like, that doesn't belong here.
Yeah.
I got lost inside this restaurant.
I think I guess maybe if we can't physically put Guy Fieri in the time capsule, one thing that I would include beyond just his programs and maybe his app is it New York Times
Yes.
food reviewer who did the review of his Times Square restaurant?
Yes.
That's all questions. Like the entire review is just the reviewer asking questions. And it is because it's this massive Times Square, like multi-story restaurant, and it is apparently just a culinary trash fire. Donkey sauce is very front and center on that menu. I can't remember what the name of the restaurant is, like a America Town or something.
Guy's American Kitchen and Bar.
Yes.
I have the review open actually right now.
Can you like read us like the opening couple of sentences?
Guy Fieri, have you eaten at your new restaurant in Times Square? Have you pulled up one of the 500 seats at Guy's American Kitchen and Bar and ordered a meal? Did you eat the food? Did it live up to your expectations? Did you notice that the menu was an unreliable predictor of what actually came to the table? Were the bourbon butter crunch chips missing from your Almond Joy cocktail too? Was your deep fried boulder of ice cream the size of a standard scoop?
And it's not a short review.
No,
this is
it's all
not.
yeah, it's
It goes and goes, and that's the tone pretty much the whole time. Is just kind of what is going on.
what hath God wrought?
Yeah.
What accounts for the vast difference between the donkey sauce recipe you've published and the donkey sauce in your restaurant?
Oh.
Another actual quote.
Ugh.
And when we hear the words donkey sauce, which part of the donkey are we supposed to think about?
There's I really feel like only so many times we can say donkey sauce before this episode becomes unpublishable.
Yeah, it automatically gets an explicit tag.
Okay, I need a palate cleanser from Guy Fieri.
Ugh, yeah.
I don't want to go. I hate to make it sound like all we have is cooking competition shows, but I wanna make sure the future knows about the best of it, like the best one.
Mm-hmm.
And that's for Americans. It's an import called the Great British Baking Show. And so
yeah,
the modern American reality show is centered on one central idea. I didn't come here to make friends. I came here to win.
True.
Everyone on Great British Baking Show came there to make friends. And it's very, very clear because everyone is delightful and nice. And yes, everyone wants to win, but it's all about just, hey, we're making kind of like Sam said at the start, we're making delicious food, we're making cake. How can we be pissed off when we're making cake? And it's wonderful. It recently is moving networks in England from the BBC to a more profit driven enterprise, and it's lost a significant amount of its talent. But one of the things I loved hearing was that there's occasionally meltdowns, and whenever there are, the hosts would stand off camera but within earshot of every microphone shouting profanities so that none of the footage was usable. They would just stand on the sides shouting just swearing at the top of their lungs to make sure that no one could be humiliated on air. And it's just like, the host, one of the hosts, Mary Berry, is just this delightful British woman, and even when you know you've messed up, she finds something nice to say about what you've done, and it's just a delight. So I really felt like we needed a different kind of cooking show.
Yes, that is. It on Netflix. It like came on like right around Christmas time a couple years ago, and was just the perfect like, all right, we're gonna sit and watch these delightful people. Essentially, like, you get to see so much of them helping each other. Like, when somebody, like, it's the only reality show where people actively try to make sure everybody's doing okay. Like, and as far as a competition, like, they will, they're not going to worsen their finished product necessarily, but they will always, like, if somebody doesn't know how to make whatever the weird specific thing they're supposed to make is, like, I've never done this, I don't know how to do it, like, someone will go over and be like, okay, so here's how, like, you should probably start with this, like, you see what I've done, do it like this, that kind of thing. It's so nice and so different from every show where in America, like, the hosts are actively trying to incite those meltdowns and not trying to prevent them from being usable footage. So good.
So much. I'm so concerned about it moving networks, and all we have left is the male judge.
Oh. I will say that on a similar the best of cooking show note, there is a show called MasterChef, which I already mentioned, and it's fine. But the real gem is the sister show to that show called MasterChef Junior, which is most of the same judges. It's Gordon Ramsay, who is famous for being this angry chef man who yells at everybody in his kitchens and is really aggressive, and he's really rough on everybody in the MasterChef regular show, which is just amateur cooks who want a shot at being the big time. MasterChef Junior is all that same premise, but with children and none of the anger, or almost none of the anger. Like, you get to see Gordon Ramsay just be like a guy who is clearly like a dad and is having fun with these young kids who are excellent at what they do, like are way better at cooking than I will ever be at like 9.
It's insane. Like,
it's
watching like a 5-year-old whip up a lobster thermidor is insane.
Oh, and it's just fun on that level because it's all these little kids who are like, yeah, like I learned how to make these incredible dishes when I was 6, and so now I'm 10 and I'm gonna take over the world. And they also really are very supportive. Almost all of them are really similar to Great British Baking Show. Like, they really do try to help each other and support each other and root each other on.
Everyone cries when anyone leaves. It's just the sweetest.
Oh, it's so good. And yeah, just kind of avoids a lot of the tropes of American reality TV, and in lieu of that is just pure joy.
The last thing I wanted to mention was another film, which is uncharacteristic in the fact that it's animated. You're not seeing actual food being made. You're seeing, in this case, computer-generated pixels on the screen. But it's the, I think, underrated Pixar film, Ratatouille, which is the story of a little mouse voiced by Patton Oswalt, who lives in France and moves to Paris, and his whole life and goal is to become a chef. I think it's adorable and sweet, but what I really wanted to pull out, we talked about the challenge the challenge of making a movie or a TV show about food, but then the challenge of making a podcast about movies and TV shows about food. And there are shows like Chef's Table that does a really good job with the cinematography and really helps you with all that. But I think Ratatouille has these moments in it where it weaves together, okay, this is some abstract movement based on what brie looks like, and this is a strawberry, and it blends these kind of abstract modern art visuals with changing music that I think, doesn't replace pictures of food. But if I could have all of my food if I could have my menu present abstract art and color to explain how it's going to make me feel or react, I think that'd be a really incredible food selection experience. It might be asking a lot of my local Applebee's. But I really felt like in terms of presenting food in a visual medium, Ratatouille does a phenomenal job.
Yeah, and just to add to that and sort of bring things full circle to the way we sort of started by talking about how a lot of times the way we feel about food is because of the associations we bring to that food, is sort of the climax of Ratatouille, where where Remy, through his human cohort Linguini, serves the food critic Anton Ego, or as he's known, the Grim Eater, Ratatouille. And in the kitchen, everyone was sort of incredulous to serve this highfalutin critic, this very simple, traditional, unpretentious.
Yeah, ratatouille is a dish made
French
basically of vegetables and olive oil. It's very, in its essence, simple.
Yeah, and when the critic takes the first bite, we sort of get to look through his eyes and into his memory and see him as a child being served this by his mother, sort of bringing to light the positive associations and the good places that food can take us, which I think is definitely essential to any discussion of food-based media.
I mean, I think that's beautiful. I'd completely forgotten about that moment, and it's important. Food is culture, and it's history, and it's art, and it's very tied up in emotion. And I think, yeah, thanks, Gabe, for really making me feel good about saying Ratatouille. Anyone have any burning desires?
I mean, now I'm just hungry.
I'm so hungry.
Yeah.
Oh, should we just each go get snacks and eat it on air?
I have a banana sitting next to me.
Is that how this ends?
Yeah, our time capsule sound will just be us chewing. Is that how you eat a banana?
Stop.
Stop. Gabe, stop eating that banana.
Yeah, I mean, short of just throwing tons of more people in there, I feel like, yeah, we're at a good place.
Yeah, I do like the only person we're putting in there is Guy Fieri.
He won't be missed.
Yeah. Which when I went to Google him to remember the entirety of his canon, and I just typed the word guy, which is also just a name for a human male, and Fieri was the autofill. He has usurped the term just guy from the internet. He owns the space now, and now he will live forever in our time capsule.
So enjoy him, future.
Yeah, take that.
We screwed you over again.
Just be glad we didn't send you the barefoot Contessa. Just kidding. I love her.
I was gonna say, you don't talk smack about Ina Garten on this program.
Oh no, I'm just jealous.
No, it's just all that broken radioactive waste that's on the ground. It's just it wouldn't be good for a barefoot person to wander around.
All right.
I hope Guy Fieri can help you turn that shanty town into a flavor town.
Turn that donkey sauce into real donkeys. Or turn your surplus of donkeys into donkey sauce, whichever way it goes.
Yeah, if the world ended because of an invasion of donkeys, maybe Guy Fieri could really rise up and be your savior.
He's not the hero we deserved. He's the hero we needed.
Yeah.
All right, let's seal this up before it gets gross.
Yeah. Any grosser.
Yeah.
All right, let's do it. Ooh.